All right, everybody, good evening. Thank you for coming. And this is New Holland Historical Society's event tonight. As usual, we'd like to thank Garden Spot Village for allowing us to use their facility. Our museum hours are up on Main Street there, are Thursdays and Saturdays, 10 to 2. Over here in this round table, we have some membership forms and a donation jar to help offset our expenses. I'd like to say thank you. With this past Sunday, we had our cemetery tour at Trinity Lutheran and St. Stephen's Cemeteries. It was a very good success, so thank you to everybody, and thanks to the Garden Spot Village players that helped us a lot for this tour. November 17th, the New Holland Historical Society is in the Extraordinary or Extra Give, so if you can keep an eye out for that, and please consider donating to us. On November 25th, it's New Holland's Christmas on Main in the center of town. There'll be lots of activities, carriage rides. The museum will be open extra hours that day. And new this year, we changed the date. It's November 25th this year instead of the first Saturday in December. But new this year, we have, it looks like we're having a carousel come in, and we also are having a laser light show. So that's something new this year. This is our last program of the year for our speaking series. We won't meet again until February 15th. February 15th, the program will be the Lancaster Thunderbolt. A championship boxer, Leo Hauk, will be I lost the word. Subject, yeah, that's it. So that's our announcement. So tonight we're talking about the Lancaster and York County connections. We have Cory and Dominish, and they will start the program.
All right, thanks.
You're on, guys.
Hi, everybody. How's everyone doing? Good. So everyone knows the Phillies are up 1-0, okay?
I've been checking my phone. I said this is the first presentation I'm going to interrupt for baseball.
So, we had a nice dinner at the New Holland Family Restaurant and a couple cups of coffee each, so
We're ready.
we're ready. So good evening. My name's Cory Van Brookhaven. I'm the president of the Lidditz Historic. Everyone hear me okay? I'm the president of the Lidditz Historical Foundation, and you are?
I'm Dominish Miller, and I run Preserving the History of Newburytown, and I am a librarian for the Third Circuit Court of Appeals in Harrisburg.
All right, great. And this is actually the fourth time we've done this program. And what's funny is, as you'll learn, it's about what the similarities that York and Lancaster County have. And this is the fourth one. We've done 2 in York, and this is the second one in Lancaster. So now we're tied again. So if anyone wants us to speak in Lancaster County tomorrow, I'll free up my schedule. So that way we're one up on York. So
I'm from York, he's from Lancaster, in case you couldn't tell.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to just go on with the slides here. Like I said, this is the fourth time we've done this program. We've kind of changed it up a little bit every time. And we always like to start with the founding of the counties. Of course, you have the Red Rose City, you have the White Rose City. And I'm not going to read every single word on every single slide, but I'm just going to go over some highlights. Lancaster County founded May 10th, 1729. It broke off from Chester County. Served as the capital for one day, which we just celebrated a couple weeks ago in 1777. York, founded August 19th, 1749. I had to look at that date. Birthplace of the Articles of Confederation, and it was here that the words, the United States of America, were first spoken. Who knew that? Okay. And it also served as the capital of the United States for more than one day. So that's the one up for Lancaster County. So one of the subjects that we're going to talk about tonight is Moravian life. I'm from Lidditz, born and raised. And if you ever spent any time in Lidditz, you know that it was founded by Moravians in 1756. It was actually named by this guy, Count Nicholas von Zinzendorf, who was a traveling preacher from Germany. And I'm not going to go into the whole long story, but the short story is there's a gentleman named John George Klein who owned 500 acres of what we now know as Lidditz Borough. And he heard Zinzendorf's preachings and was so moved that he decided to donate his entire farm, all 500 acres, to start this new Moravian community. And that was in 1756. For 99 years, you had to be a Moravian to live in Lidditz, up until 1855. Okay, there was a small village just north of the town, outside of the town limits, called Warwick. Okay, and today it's kind of considered Warwick Township. Back then, it was a place for non-Moravians, and the funny joke is, years later, the railroad came along. So it all depended on if you were from the right side of the tracks or the wrong side of the tracks, whether you were Moravian or not. 2 churches in York County, 2 churches in Lancaster County, 2 Moravian churches. Okay, so when you lived in Lidditz, closed community, everyone had a different trade. There couldn't be more than one of the same trade. This guy, David Tannenberg, built organs in the colonies. And this is now an apartment complex, but if you can imagine, in the 1700s, that was a stone building, and his organ shop was actually in the rear. It was a smaller building back then, what it is now. His family lived in the stone building. He made organs, like I said, for the colonies, 9 of which still are around, and 2 are still in the possession and able to be played in the Lidditz Moravian Church. A little bit more about David Tannenberg. These are the 2 organs that I mentioned earlier, 9 extent. These are the 2, the chapel, there's in the chapel, and then the bigger one there. And the one on the far right is one in York, which I guess is in storage right now, or?
Currently, if you go to the York Historical Society or the York History Center, it is there, but right now it was disassembled piece by piece, and it's being restored, it's being worked on. I'm not sure how that process works, but eventually when the new steam plant opens in York, they're building a new campus for the Historical Society, they're going to bring it back and reassemble it piece by piece. And they don't have an exact timeline on that yet, but I'm sure it's probably going to coincide with the grand opening of the York History Center. And then we have the Quakers of York County. So the Quakers first came to York County around 1734, and by 1738, they built one of their first meeting houses. So something about Quakers is they came to Pennsylvania. Everyone knows William Penn, Penn's Woods, that's what Pennsylvania is named after. And he was a Quaker, and he helped the Quakers gain their religious freedoms here in the colonies. And by 1738, when they started putting their meeting houses together, something interesting, you had to be 10 miles outside of a city. So I live in Newburytown, York County. So we have 2 Quaker meeting houses, and it's 10 miles from York City. So you also had to be about 5 miles from your village or your town. So Newburytown is considered a village. So we have one in town, and then about 5 miles is the next meeting house, and then 10 miles from that is York City. And the Quakers don't like to be called Quakers, they like to be called Friends. That's what they call each other, and that's what they like to be called. And there's 4 different denominations of Quaker Friends. You have the Conservative Friends, the Evangelical Friends, the Pastoral Friends, and the Liberal Friends. So just like Christians, they sort of broke off and have their different denominations. But here I have some pictures of the Quaker meeting houses in Newburytown, York County. And then the Amish. So the Amish are predominantly in Lancaster County, and you have the largest population of Amish in the United States, and it's just a little over 74,000 Amish. And something that happens with the Amish, they have a lot of children, so the population is always increasing. And that's really unique to them because there's no other denomination, religious denomination in the United States that is growing as quickly as the Amish. And there's actually some Amish that are starting to move into York County, and a lot of them are near the Normanwood Bridge. And in 2010 was the last time we had an official census of the Amish population in York County. So at that time, there was about 300 to 500 Amish in York County. And I'm pretty confident in saying I believe that that number has probably doubled, if not tripled, by now in 2023. A lot of them are moving for different farmland, for different working opportunities with the farmers market, and so on.
Okay, so let's step back a little bit and talk about the earliest inhabitants here in the area. Susquehannocks, also known as the Giants, prolific here in Lancaster County, in Lidditz, where I'm from. We also had the Nanticokes. They moved to the Susquehanna Valley here, as the panel says, about 1550. And like so many other things, they were located both here and York County as well. Just more tribes here from these two areas that inhabited our area. I mentioned some of these earlier in the previous slide. 10 tribes in Lancaster County between 1650 and about 1750, about a 100-year span, if you can imagine that. Yes, even up to 1750, which kind of seems late, but I mean, they were here a long time for sure.
And then in York County, you had the Algonquins, the Susquehannocks, and the Shawnee, and they lived along the shores of the Susquehanna River in southern York County. And if any of you have been to the Indian Steps Museum in York County, this is a picture of the mantelpiece there. The Indian Steps Museum was created by a gentleman that was really interested in Native American life, and he collected a lot of things just along the riverbank and other antiques. And he basically turned this home into a giant Native American museum. So you can still go there today and tour it. And then if you've ever been to the Zimmerman Center down along the river in York County, that's another place where you can learn a lot about the Native American tribes that inhabited York County and Lancaster County. And now we're going to talk about the local artists that came out of York and Lancaster. My personal favorite York County artist is Lewis Miller. So Lewis Miller is famous for drawing and painting everyday life in York County. So this first smaller picture, you can see that that is the Geiger family and Lewis Miller. So that was 3 brothers working on their farm, and Lewis Miller is the man in the top hat going behind them. And you can see the detail he put into his work. This was one family that was very agricultural in York County. And something interesting is that sheep were not that common as a farm animal in York County, but you can see behind Lewis Miller are 2 sheep following him in the painting. And then the York County camp. So that is a picture of the local Union troops that were training at the Old York Fairgrounds in the summer of 1861 at the start of the Civil War. In my spare time, I am a Civil War reenactor with the 87th Pennsylvania Company C, and that regiment was historically recruited out of York County, and those men would have trained here at the Old York Fairgrounds. So how many of you have been to the York Fair? Yeah, a lot of you. So, just picture the fairgrounds, but picture it just being a drilling center for troops and a field hospital during the Civil War. So a lot of Lewis Miller's work, it's just depicting the everyday life, the occupation when the Confederates came into York County, and then farm life, which is something that you don't often see. I think a lot of artists, especially of that time in the 1800s, are going to paint these beautiful vistas and picturesque scenes, but he was really just focusing on what your average person would have seen in York County.
So we have one as well, Charles Demuth, notable Lancaster artist. His home is now the Demuth Museum. Has anyone been there? Okay, a few hands. His family owned the oldest tobacco shop in the United States, opened in 1770, closed in 2010. And I don't know if anyone saw the newspaper article the other day. They're going to be opening up the tobacco shop again, to not on a regular, ongoing basis, but for special occasions. So that's some really good news.
And then we're going to talk about food. So we are very lucky to live in an area that has amazing food. And I don't know if any of you knew this, but York County is actually considered the snack food capital of the world. And that's not a designation that I made up. It's real. You can Google it. But that's just because of all of the different foods that come out of York County. Think about Utz potato chips, Snyder's of Hanover, those really prolific brands that you're going to find in the grocery store. And a lot of them just happen to be snack food items.
And who knew we were in the pretzel belt? Right. I mean, it kind of makes sense if we're the snack capital of the world. But yes, the pretzel belt is a thing. And has anyone ever taken the tour of Sturgis Pretzel Bakery in Lidditz, twisted your own pretzel? Yeah, many of you. So that's actually the oldest commercial pretzel bakery in the nation, founded in 1861 by Julius Sturgis. And I think part of the reason, I mean, it only makes sense to me that, pretzels, German influence of this area, Pennsylvania Dutch, I mean, it all kind of makes sense. In the 1920s, there was actually 11 different pretzel manufacturers in Lidditz alone. Now, yeah, there was some all around the county, but just in Lidditz alone in the 1920s, there was 11 pretzel bakeries. That's how high the demand was. One by one, they went out of business, but today, Sturgis is still around. People come from all over the world to twist a pretzel.
I had a stint in college. I worked for Subway, and they attached a Annie Ann's pretzel shop to it. So I was a sandwich artist for a little while, and then I became a pretzel twister.
Nice. So yeah, just what we talked about earlier, here's Sturgis Pretzel Bakery. Just little architecture note there. This is not the building he built. Now, he moved into this building. This is actually the Peter Kreider house, in 1786 is when this was built. He was a carriage maker. This is stone. Sturgis came along. If you've been to Sturgis, you know there's a little brick addition to the left. When Sturgis moved, purchased the building, he added the brick addition to the left, which can't really see in that picture. You can see the big pretzel that's still there. People like to take their photos with. Okay, did somebody say chocolate? You can't talk about snacks in this region without talking about the almighty Wilbur Bud. Who's had a Wilbur Bud? Hopefully everyone's hand, right. It's a staple. It actually started in Philadelphia, not Lidditz, but Lidditz has claimed ownership since the early 1900s. It's been owned by different companies through the years. These days it's owned by a food manufacturing company called Cargill, but you can still go into the retail shop on Broad Street and get samples of Wilbur Buds, and they have other chocolatey treats, things that they dip in chocolate, graham crackers, and all this other thing. So if you've ever even been to Lancaster County, even briefly, if you're not from here, there's a good chance you've had a Wilbur Bud. They're very hard to find outside of this region. They're very expensive to buy, too. A friend of mine was telling me the other day, they were at Reading Terminal Market in Philadelphia, and they had Wilbur Buds. It was like a stand. They wanted $22 a pound. Whereas at the store, if you drive to Lidditz, they're about $12 for a pound bag. So, yeah, but unless you get them by mail order, again, outside of Lancaster County, they're very hard to find, and they're better than Hershey's too, right? I mean, let's just. So, Wilbur Buds are no longer made in Lidditz. They actually haven't been for several years now. In fact, the building that you see now isn't manufacturing Wilbur chocolate anymore. This is now apartments, condos. There's a little food market, and everyone was up in arms in our community maybe about 5 or 6 years ago when they were talking about revitalizing this building. And, what are they going to do to the building? But my personal theory was, hey, I'm glad to see it's not going to be knocked down. I mean, that's an iconic building with the beautiful lettering there, which they actually redid. So I'm so glad that they kept this building. They did open up a retail store across the street, so you can still get your Wilbur Buds.
The last time Cory and I did this presentation, we had been talking about this building and how happy we were that it's still standing. And that night I got home and I got a news alert that there was a fire in the building. So I was like, oh no, here we are talking about it being preserved and it's going to burn down. Thankfully, the fire was contained, and the restaurant in the bottom of the building, and I think some apartments were closed for a few months, but we were just at the Lidditz Italian Festival together, and we were able to go in, and the restaurant is reopened, and thank goodness for that, a strong brick construction and good firefighters in Lancaster County.
Yeah, the building has good bones. In fact, if there's a hotel there too, I think I mentioned that. If you get a chance, you go into Lidditz, walk into the hotel. The lobby smells like chocolate. They actually pump. She can vouch for me. They actually
it really does.
pump.
It's amazing. It's like when you go to Hershey, Pennsylvania, everything smells like Hershey's chocolate. You go into this building and you just smell Wilbur Buds.
Yeah. And you can see they've preserved as much as possible. They've had some artifacts there and some old photos on the wall. There's no ride like at Hershey, but it's still fun.
You need a Wilbur Buds roller coaster.
Right.
But not to be outdone, York County, we have chocolate too. How many of you have eaten Wolfgang candy? Anybody? A few of you. Okay. Okay, so Wolfgang Candy was founded by Delphi Eli and Mima May Wolfgang. Say that three times fast. And it was founded in 1921. And again, primarily a York County business. For many, many years, their main distribution center and warehouse was in York City itself. And they now have expanded and they have a warehouse in Loganville. Oh, yeah, we heard someone say yes. And now we're going to talk about my personal favorite, minor league baseball, the War of the Roses. And I am still following the Phillies game. If anyone has an update, just put up a hand of how many runs we have. Oh,
There we go.
oh, don't tell. Okay, maybe don't tell me. Only tell me if we're winning.
So the Lancaster Barnstormers, that's sort of our minor league team. I think it's AAA. Has anyone ever been to a Barnstormers game? Oh, a lot of hands. Okay, great. It's a fun time. I haven't been there in a couple years, but it's always a good old time. That was formed in 2005, Clipper Magazine Stadium, and it's a good time. If been around a while, you might remember there was actually a baseball team called the Lancaster Red Roses. They played at Stump Field off of Manheim Pike. This was years and years ago. Okay, you remember that? Yep. But now we have the Lancaster Barnstormers.
And for the Phillies fans, Bryce Harper's little brother played for the Lancaster
That's
Barnstormers.
right. I did know that, yeah.
And everyone knows minor league baseball players don't make a lot of money, so he actually lived with a host family in Lancaster. Him and a teammate did.
These are just some major league players from Lancaster County. Tom Herr, Bruce Sutter, and of course Gene Garber. Maybe you saw them play. I know at least Tommy Herr's played in at least 3 or 4 teams over the years. He was best known for the Cardinals. I remember, as an aside, coming out of church one day years ago, Tommy Herr's in-laws went to the same church, the Lititz Moravian Church. And he was coming out of church. We were all coming out of church. And even though it was coming out of church, I was a little starstruck. And as a kid, I had to ask him for his autograph. So I thought that was kind of cute. I still have it somewhere. So
You should have that framed or something.
I know.
Okay, so we're going to talk about the York Revolution. Has anyone been to a York Revolution game in York County? Okay, a few of you. So there's been some changes over the years. So they were established in 2006, and it was called People's Bank Park, but this past year it is now Wellspan Park. Wellspan is very prevalent in York County, and that was February 2023. And then I have a picture of Cannonball Charlie. So instead of just having a mascot, we also have Cannonball Charlie that anytime there's a home run, he shoots off a cannon. So unfortunately, Cannonball Charlie just retired. So I don't believe that they have an official Cannonball shooter offer yet. Being a Civil War reenactor, some of us use artillery pieces and can shoot off cannons, and they had asked if anyone wanted to volunteer to work the cannon. Clearly a missed opportunity. I would have loved to do that. My schedule did not allow, but if anyone has some spare time on their hands and knows how to use a cannon, you can sign up for that job. Cannonball Charlie also wrote a children's book about being the mascot for the York Revolution, and it was really cute. He would go to elementary schools and he would go to local public libraries dressed as a Revolutionary War, like Minuteman. He would bring the cannon along and he would hand out his kids' books. And I think he even had like a little doll action figure. Yeah, it was really cool, but the kids loved it. And then some York Countyans that made it to Major League Baseball. So coming out of York County, everyone knows Greg Gross. He's the pride and joy of Goldsboro, which is right beside Newberrytown. This is a sign. There's 2 signs, one when you enter Goldsboro and one when you leave, and it says, "Welcome to Goldsboro, home of Greg Gross." And this sign's a little dilapidated. Recently, some teenagers defaced it. So they ended up splurging and buying a brand new sign. I have to update these slides with the new sign, and I think he'd be happy that the new sign is much nicer than this one. But Greg Gross played for the Phillies, so just another reason to love him. And then Redland High School is in York County, and that is my alma mater, and it is also the alma mater of Benny Montgomery. So he was just recently, within the last 2 years, right out of high school, he was drafted by the Rockies, and he's playing minor league ball for them, and he's doing fantastic. So we're really excited to have another hometown hero make it to the major leagues. And then I don't know if any of you follow the Little League World Series, but for those of us in York County, the Redland Little League team back in 2015 was just the biggest thing to ever happen to our area. So the Little League World Series in 2015 saw the Redland Little League team win the Mid-Atlantic Little League Championship. So they made it all the way up to Williamsport. And this team, being from Redland, if you're not aware, York County has different little town names that kind of all go together, and they're just called the Redland area. And that's because that area has red clay soil, so it was just dubbed Redland. So there's Redland High School, Redland Library, Redland Little League. But these kids were farmed from different towns. It wasn't just one town called Redland. So ESPN didn't really know what to do with that, and the coach was from Lewisberry. So on ESPN they said, this Redland little team, they're amazing, they're from Lewisberry, population 390 people. So everyone on ESPN thought that this little town of 300 and some people made a stellar U.S. champion Little League team. And I mean, they kind of did, but they were also from Fairview, they were from Newberrytown, Lewisberry, Goldsboro, but they made it all the way into the final game against Japan, and they didn't win the whole thing, but they won the U.S. championship. And they're just hometown heroes. They had a big parade for them when they came back. They got to miss like the first 2 weeks of school, which they thought was awesome. Yeah. And then there was a book written about them, Boys in the Field, A Championship Journey from Redland to Williamsport. And that was written by one of the teachers at Redland High School. And a lot of these kids are now in college, and they are playing minor league ball. They're playing college ball. And some of the kids that were on the team, their dads and uncles were actually in the major leagues or college ball players. So they come from really good stock. But back in 2015, like all of York County was united around these boys. They were amazing.
Okay, so now we get to the Susquehanna River, which literally a bridge divides us, meaning York and Lancaster County. And points to ponder about the Susquehanna River. It is the longest river on the East Coast. How many people knew that? Yeah, you did, okay, all right. How many knew that Lancaster County owns the river? 2 of you, okay.
Okay, well, I have to butt in here.
Yes, please.
So we were told at one of our presentations not to say it like that. Lancaster doesn't own the river, you own the land underneath the river, because water rights are different than land rights. Right. But yeah, you can walk out about 10 feet into the water from York County, and you're then in Lancaster County.
Yep. The river also predates the Atlantic Ocean, very old, ancient river. Not that deep, okay? Not navigable, really. And time has reduced the river to, like I said, shallow conditions. So it's quite an anomaly based on the age, but also the depth. Yep, go ahead.
Okay, and this is just, again, explaining more about who owns the river, Lancaster or York County. So prior to 1749, what is now York County was actually a part of Lancaster County. So that's another thing that we have in common. You guys used to technically own York County. And in 1749, York County was established. The official legal documents state that the boundary of York County begins on the west bank of the Susquehanna River. And that means that the entire Susquehanna River that borders on Lancaster and York counties is technically in Lancaster County, and that to this day has still not changed.
Okay, so staying at the Susquehanna River, there are things called petroglyphs at Big and Little Indian Rock. Those are markers, different areas of small, not islands, but just markers. South of Safe Harbor, if you're familiar with that, in the Susquehanna River, of course. It's considered to be a prehistoric archaeological site, very rare. There's some drawings on certain days. There's a picture there. You have to run water, maybe with a sponge or something, and these shapes come up, these ancient shapes. Some they know what they are, others are still kind of mysterious. They don't know every single thing here. Like I said, very old, at least 1,000 years old, and it's very tough to access these. You can't just walk out to them. You have to get onto a canoe. The water is rough. It's shallow, as we talked about. So every once in a while, they do offer excursions to go out there, and it's still very dangerous. You almost have to hug the side, and it depends on how, if the water is high or low. Sometimes these could be completely underwater. Sometimes they could be exposed.
And it is something, if any of you are ever brave enough to get in a kayak or canoe and go out there, this is an archaeological site. So the official tours that are given, they ask you to take off your shoes when you're walking on the rock. The last thing they really want is the rock to wear down from tourism and to mess up these prehistoric dwellings. So it is something that if you or a friend or you tell someone to go out there, just please be mindful of the fact that it's supposed to be treated with reverence. This is something very sacred to the Native Americans and their heritage. And then we're going to talk about cryptids a little bit. So this is in the spirit of Halloween is coming up. How many of you have heard of the Columbia albitwitch? This is the Lancaster cryptid. So albitwitch, apple snitch, or apple witch, most sightings of this crazy little creature has been near Chickee's Rock. So it's supposed to be about 3 to 5 feet tall, and apples are its favorite food. So if it's ever chasing you through Lancaster County, throw an apple to get it off your tail. And there's actually like a little festival that happens, Albitwitch Day, which takes place in Columbia every October. This year it was sort of a rain out, unfortunately, but I still think they got a good turnout.
Yep. We still had it.
Yeah, you know, they have pictures of the guy. I'm sure you can get t-shirts, different things like that. But I think every society sort of has their own cryptid. You know, you hear about Bigfoot, you hear about the Yeti, and Lancaster, you guys have the Albitwitch. Not to be outdone, York, we have Bigfoot of all things. So the Farm and Natural Land Trust of York County hosts an annual Sasquatch Preservation Trail Run, and that's what these pictures are from. So for a small fee, you too can run 3.5 miles and have a Bigfoot chase you. And afterwards, they take pictures with the Bigfoot. I'm sure the Bigfoot is probably just a volunteer from the Farm and Natural Land Trust, but most sightings of Bigfoot are in the more rural areas of York County. Mount Wolf hosts a Sasquatch 5K trail run, and scientists kind of debunk our little sightings of Bigfoot when they happen. They say that the prevalence of Bigfoot and Sasquatch sightings in York County can be attributed to black bears. But I'm sure there's still some real believers out there. We have yet to capture him or get him on film. But as you can see, there's plenty of people willing to run around the forest dressed like Bigfoot for a good cause, so.
Okay, so now we go to the Lincoln Highway, just one of the many things that we share between Lancaster and York County and beyond. Lincoln Highway spreads long across several states, not just, that's okay. Yeah, again, you can read this little history of the Lincoln Highway. I'm just going to focus on our area between York and Lancaster County. At one time, there was 28 markers set up there by the Boy Scouts. Now there's only a few. There's actually only one, which we'll see in Lancaster County, in Columbia, right there it is. And you can actually go out and see this. It's a kind of a neat little artifact. Anyone can go out and see that. It's along the sidewalk. You can take pictures with it and of it, whatever. But it's cemented into the ground. And like I said, at one time there was so many of these all around, but this is the only one that's left in Lancaster County. Now, when I say left, I don't mean gone. There's a couple that are out there in the Lancaster County Historical Society, but as far as ones that are actually in the same spot by the road pointing in the direction of the Lincoln Highway, this is the only one in Lancaster County that you can see.
And York, we still have a few that are in place. So you can go to 1341 West Market Street and you can see it there cemented into the ground. And you can also go to Paradise Township, but this marker is on private property, so we're not going to give out the address. But if you were to drive by, I'm sure if you keep your distance on the edge of the road that they'd allow you to take some photographs of it. And then there's one in Helm Township near Duckstown Road. And you can see we zoomed in on there so you can see the plaque of the historic highway, or the highway dedicated to Abraham Lincoln plaque that's on the marker. All
right, let's talk another subject, Underground Railroad. Both of our counties share some of that storied history. In Lancaster, there were several locations where the underground, where the Underground Railroad happened. Columbia, we just talked about Columbia with the Albitwitch Festival and Lincoln Highway. There was an Underground Railroad site there. It was actually the Western Terminus. And by 1838, privately owned freight rail cars were modified with special compartments to transport freedom seekers from Philadelphia and other locations. Okay, so if you get a chance, if you go to the Columbia Museum there, or the Columbia Preservation Society, they have more information on that. And there's also a couple sites around Lancaster County. I mean, we're not going to go into depth into every single one. There's one off of Beachdale Road in Amish country, too.
And in York County, I'm sure there's many I could talk about, but I wanted to highlight one in particular. Harriet Tubman ended up visiting this farm in Newberry Township, and it's mentioned in a book by Scott Mingus, who is a very prolific Civil War author and local history author. So if you ever get a chance to buy any of his books, The Ground Swallowed Them Up is a great one about the Underground Railroad. And that's the Baptist farm in Newberry Township, and the farm is still standing. It's private property, but you can go by and take pictures. Eliza and Ezekiel Baptist were a free black family living in York County. York County boasted a lot of free blacks living in the county. A lot of them would come up, cross the Mason-Dixon line, and be safe in York County from the Fugitive Slave Act. And they would hide people in their barn, in their home. They farmed their land, they had children, they raised a family, but they were willing to risk their lives and their safety because even though they were a free black family in York County and relatively safe, slavers could come across the Mason-Dixon line to pursue slaves. You were allowed to pursue them into free territory. So they were really risking a lot by doing this. It's on Steinhauer Road. Again, it is a private property, but even on Google Maps, you can see an aerial view of the farm. It doesn't look much like it would have back in the 1800s, the 1700s, but it's a great piece of history, and Harriet Tubman, like I said, ended up staying a night there. A lot of people, there's a lot of lore around the Underground Railroad, and a lot of people that own old homes or have old farms in the family, they'll have a legend, a lore that says, you know, like this was part of the Underground Railroad. But we'll never really know a lot of the places that were part of the Underground Railroad, and that was by design. If you were running a stop on the Underground Railroad, you had to be quiet about it. The only people that needed to know were other people that were running Underground Railroad stops, and obviously people who were seeking their freedom. So a lot of this has been lost to history because it wasn't written down. It was just passed through people, through secret, through word of mouth. So I'm sure that the Underground Railroad has a long and storied history in York County and Lancaster County, but by design, we'll never know the full story. And that brings us to the oldest homes in Lancaster and York.
So oldest homes, has anyone toured the Hans Herr house? Oh, many of you, okay. So that is considered to be the oldest home in Lancaster County, 1719. It's in West Lampeter Township. There's also a log home or a roundhouse that they built in recent years too. If we could just, that's okay, you're good. Another picture of the Hans Herr house in color this time. Also the oldest Mennonite meeting house in America. Did you know that? So that's the oldest house in Lancaster.
And then I have a list of the oldest homes in York. So we're going to talk about the Golden Plough Tavern, the Hoke House, and the Hammersley Strominger House. So first is the Golden Plough Tavern in 1741, and this contains a wood shingled roof, which was rare in America at that time. And this is actually on the campus of the Colonial Complex for the York History Center. So have any of you been to the Colonial Complex at the York History Center? It's a great place. So the Colonial Complex boasts the Golden Plough Tavern, which is open for tours. So a docent who is dressed in colonial garb will take you around. They have a summer kitchen where they make food in the summer. There's a garden that they actually grow plants and vegetables in. They have articles of Confederation Day, which we talked about earlier. So it's a really great place that you can still tour. Oops. And then we have the Hoke House. So I'm sure that some of you are aware the Hoke House has been in the news. And if you're not, it's because Rudders bought the land and they wanted to tear it down. So from the time of its construction in 1750 into the early 1800s, it functioned as a tavern along the pioneering Monocacy Road, and that was a major route in the American frontier. Today it's around Route 16, and it's the main road leading from York through Spring Grove, Hanover, and on to Gettysburg. So once you go through the roundabout in Spring Grove, that's the first thing you're going to see on your right. And again, Rudders bought the land, and they want to put oil tanks right below the Hoke House. So thankfully, a nonprofit organization was able to raise the money. They're going to pick it up, and they're going to move it. Yeah, so there was a lot of people that came together in Spring Grove, and they really rallied around this house because it's a piece of history. It's the first thing you see when you enter town, and it's been there forever. So it's great to see that they're going to do something with it, and it's going to help a lot of people with this nonprofit. I believe they help veterans, which I'm always really grateful for. So I think it's gonna be great from a preservation standpoint. Just because something's an old home doesn't mean it needs to stay a home. It can become a business as long as the historical integrity is still there. They're not going to dismantle it and build a new facade. They're not going to put siding on it. It's still going to look the way it is. It's just going to have a different purpose. And then the Hammersley-Strominger House, which was built in 1790. And this was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1978. And this has a special place in my heart because my third great-grandparents lived here. They were the Stromingers. So you can see that it's like two different houses in one. So it was built in stages. So you can see that the wooden part of the house was built first, and then it was built onto. So the Hammersleys lived there first, and then after the Stromingers, my third great-grandparents bought it, they added on to it. So it's still in use today. It's a private property, so you can't tour it, but I have spoken to the woman that lives there. She's doing a great job preserving it, and it's really great to see a piece of my family history be on the historical register.
Okay, shifting gears a little bit. It seems like every town, whether it be Pennsylvania or beyond, drops something, on New Year's Eve.
Which is, I think, unique to Pennsylvania. I don't know many other
Oh,
states that
okay.
randomly drop things on New Year's Eve. I think, I talk to people out of state, and they're like,
That's
you do
news
what?
to me. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought that was a thing that, like you grew up thinking something is, that's how it is everywhere. And just some examples here. Of course, there's no surprise that Lancaster, and you probably know that, or maybe you were at the celebration throughout the years, Lancaster drops the red rose, and they've been doing that since 2007. They actually replaced it, the rose they're dropping these days. It's the second rose for those keeping track. The earliest one kind of started to fall apart, so this is their second rose that they're dropping, and of course York drops the white rose. Pretty obvious there, the white rose, the red rose cities, and their rose drops, in Continental Square in York, and both celebrations have fireworks, music, food, fun, all kinds of neat things. Fire and ice. Lancaster has Fire and Ice. Lidditz Fire and Ice Festival is a big deal. It takes place usually around the second weekend of February when it's cold. What's the fire part? Well, they have a chili cook-off. They have, has anyone ever been to the Lidditz Fire and Ice? Yeah, many, okay. So you know where it is. They have those ice sculptures throughout the town. This event seems to grow every single year. They've been doing it at least 15 to 20 years now. And when you consider it's not only neat to see ice and visit your friends and family and, participate in the chili cook-off, the reason they started this, and especially in February, is because it's a nice shot in the arm for the retailers when typically first quarter is their slowest time of year. Christmas is over. So that was, at least in Lidditz, that's why they started this years and years ago, to bring a lot of people into the town.
And then the York version, it features a 40-foot ice slide. So that's what that little boy is sliding on right now. So if you're brave, you can do that in York. And there's about 20 ice sculptures, and there's multiple musical acts and things throughout the day. So ours isn't 10 days long like Lancaster's, but it's a fun day in York. And again, it's great for the local businesses in the community to get everyone together and have some fun. Poor Cory knows that when I went to the last day of the Lidditz Fire and Ice Festival this year, a lot of the sculptures had melted. We had an unusually warm season, and I got there and I was looking at some of the sculptures and I was like, what is that supposed to be?
Yeah.
But they were so great, and I don't know if you were behind this or not, but you said some people redid their ice sculptures and brought them in. So there were some that completely melted, but the companies that sponsored them, they brought in new ice sculptures to kind of revitalize it. So it wasn't a bust, it was still a fantastic day. So it was fun. It was like, that one's new and that one's been there a little while.
Yeah, so they learned their lesson based on the weather, because you can't predict the weather. Some Februarys are warmer than others. And they've had those kind of complaints. If you don't get there right when they're putting the sculptures out, they could melt. Well, they got wise to that, and I think either last year or the year before, they started putting them out in stages, spreading the event over 10 days instead of just a weekend, and put out fresh ice, I'll call it, halfway through the event. So, yeah, they learned their lesson on that one. But I too, like she said, I mean, if it's a warm day and you go to look at a statue that's been out there 3 days, you're not sure if it's supposed to be, an airplane or Bugs Bunny or,
And that is our presentation. So you can follow us on Facebook. Cory has Remember When in Lidditz, and I have Preserving the History of Newberrytown. I also have a YouTube channel, so a lot of the presentations that we do either together or separately, I have archived on my YouTube channel. I also do a educational video series with a colleague of mine called Hometown History, and that focuses on York County history. Every month we have about a 45-minute long presentation that we film, and then afterwards for 15 minutes we interview someone about the topic that we just spoke about. So it's a great way just to get local history out, and we have it geared toward like college-aged people or people that are just getting into their local history. But at this time we'd like to open it up to any questions or comments. A lot of the times after we do these presentations, there are people that are really invested in their York or Lancaster history that tell us, well, you should have talked about this, or I remember when I grew up it was this way. So we're open to constructive criticism and any suggestions that you think we should add, and we already have a taker.
I was going to say, could you raise the lights? Perfect, thank you.
Yes.
And the adjective that was used was giant.
Giant, yes.
And I wonder, do you have any evidence that you have? Oh,
A microphone, sir.
yeah,
Look at this.
Susquehannock Indians and the reference to them as being giants. Do you have any evidence to that fact?
Yeah,
That-
Captain John Smith actually called them those.
Yeah, so Captain John Smith, when he got here, he had sort of a diary with him, and he would sketch, and that drawing that you saw of the giant Native American was from him. And the reason that they thought these Native Americans were giants was because at the time, your average Native American was a few inches taller than your average European. And that was because of the difference in diet and lifestyle. Native Americans were agricultural, they lived off the land, they were muscular, they hunted, they walked everywhere. Europeans were getting used to a more industrial lifestyle, living in cities. Air pollution affected things, your diet affected how large you get. There were some quotes from the captain and from some of the men that landed in America that they were saying that the calves of the men of the Native Americans were like the size of what we'd consider a basketball today. Now that's not true. They exaggerated a lot. But you can imagine if you're landing in a new world and you're seeing a type of person for the first time that you've never seen before, everything's going to be a little exaggerated. So there is proof that they were larger in build and stature than the average European, but they definitely weren't giants. They weren't like your NBA players. They were just, still probably under 6 feet tall. I want to say maybe like 5'10", 5'11". But the average man and the average woman was larger than a European.
Can you comment on the background of the terms Lancaster and York, and why one is a red rose and one is a white rose?
Sure, maybe we can each do our own county. Lancaster comes from Lancashire, England, like so many towns. Warwickshire, Warwickshire, England. We did recently learn the rose. I think we learned there was
Yes.
an exchange or something with that. Now is it the York Revolution and the Barnstormers do play a War of the Roses game? So where does the roses come from? Where does that originate?
Well, so the royal houses in England, there was the red rose family and then a family with the white roses. So there literally was a war of the roses.
Yeah, there really was.
Yeah, so again, you're saying Lancashire, England, Yorkshire, England. A lot of the
right.
places in the 13 colonies in America got their names from either not royal houses of England, but wealthy families in England. The towns would be named after them. So Lancaster, York, that's why we have New York, things like that. It was just considered like a new place in the colony that was named after. Virginia was named after the Virgin Queen. So things like that.
Yes, sir. The mic's coming to you.
Thank you. Thank you. My name's Turk Pierce. I work for newspapers in both York County and Lancaster.
Oh, nice.
2 corrections and an omission. Bruce Sutter, only 1 T in his last name. It's Ducktown Road, not Duxtown Road.
Oh, okay.
No, I was an editor.
All right. We're not going to argue with you. We're not going to argue with you.
How can you mention baseball players from York County without mentioning Vic Wertz? Vic Wertz was clearly the best player ever to come out of York County. He was a star for the Tigers and the Indians in the 40s and the 50s. Unfortunately, he's best known for being the victim of Willie Mays' over-the-shoulder catch in the 1954
Oh, I've heard of that.
World
Yeah.
Series.
That was him? Okay.
I'm typing that up right now. It's going right in.
We do, thank you for the corrections. We appreciate it. We will change the spelling of those going forward. Your second question comes up almost at every time we do this, whether it's in York or Lancaster. You omitted that. Why didn't you talk about this or that? And point taken. I mean, we could be here for 3 hours talking about as specific as you want to get. We try to do highlight. We're not, I mean, I appreciate the comment. Thank you. We try to give a nice overview. Obviously, the slant is towards history and transportation and so forth, religion. Yeah, I mean, we could, this thing could be 3-4 hours long.
And we do actually take your comments into consideration
Yeah.
because this being the 4th time we've done this, we don't want people who have come before to be bored. So we do try and change it up every time. This is the first time we have included the Amish and the Quakers.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, so we have changed things, but you feel very strongly about that one, so we'll add it.
Okay, yeah, in the front.
You talked about the Tannenberg organs and that there's still 9 that are being played. Is there a place and a time where that would be, where the general public could hear a Tannenberg organ?
Yeah, well, the 2 in Lidditz, the one in the smaller chapel isn't played on a regular basis. None of them are played on a regular basis, okay? Certain times of the year, the bigger one in what's now considered Fellowship Hall is played on special occasions. The one in the chapel, I don't even know the last time, that was the smaller one, the last time that was played. And as far as York, it's probably not going to be anytime soon, but
Yeah, when they reassemble the one in York and put it in the new steam plant for the York History Center, they did frequently have organ concerts. You just have to look on the website. And again, that's sort of the reason why it is being refurbished, because they want it to be played for years to come. So this is just, it's, I don't know, like 100-year tune-up.
yeah. But I can do one better than your question. If you go to Tannenberg.com, davidtannenberg.com. That's a website that's run by a gentleman named Phil Cooper, who actually used to be involved with the Lidditz Moravian Church. He's like the renowned expert on all things David Tannenberg. He has information on all the known Tannenbergs, whether they still exist or not, pictures, and he has sound clips of the 9 extant Tannenberg organs. So you could just go on your computer or on your smart device and listening to, I know it's not being there in person, but it's the next best thing. You can actually hear a small clip. That's him playing too. davidtannenberg.com. There's also a book on David Tannenberg, not written by Phil Cooper. I forget the author. It came out 40, 50 years ago. It's called Organs for America. It talks about David Tannenberg and his organs. So, yeah.
Thank you.
I saw a hand back there, I thought, or there's one there too. This lady down, she had a question.
This isn't a question, it's a comment. When you talked about the snacks around the world, about 8 years ago, I was in Switzerland, and we were on a train in a little rural area. There was a little town that had a store you went into, a little tiny grocery store, and there on the side of their one cabinet was little packages of Snyder's pretzels.
Oh, that's cool.
That's amazing.
I was shocked.
Snack food capital of the world for real.
Isn't it cool whenever you see a product made in Pennsylvania or something very recognizable from our region, and you see it in a movie or a TV show? I always use the example of Victor mousetraps, which are still made in Lidditz. It's the signature mousetrap with the little red V. You see it in like things from movies in the 20s, and they've been making the same thing for over 100 years. But if next time you see a mousetrap in a movie or a TV show, I can almost guarantee, look for a big red V. It's Victor. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a Facebook group about Pennsylvania Dutch heritage, and all the time it's people that don't live in Pennsylvania that are like just think Pennsylvania Dutch heritage is so cool, and they've been here to visit and they want our food. So on there, almost every day, people are saying, if anyone lives in Lancaster, if anyone lives in York, can you go get me this kind of pretzel? Can you go get me this kind of chip and like mail it to me? I'll pay for the shipping. Can you send this to Alaska? Can you send this to Arizona? So, I mean, we're so lucky to live here and have access to all these things, because there's a lot of people out of state that got a little taste of our food and now they can't find it anywhere else. So you have to FedEx it to them.
Not to mention Amish baked goods and things like that, you know. Speaking of snack food, we talk about the Moravians. Anyone ever hear of a Moravian sugar cake? Yeah, so it's like a square brown sugar. Yep.
Yeah, I wondered if
Yep.
I wondered if you ever do any lecture on the civil wars in England that were the War of Roses in the 15th century. Anybody do that?
I'm sure.
I mean, because it was a very, I mean, it changed English history.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure that there are people. It's not us. But maybe we should start. But no, I mean, I'm sure maybe if you contacted the Revolutionary War Museum in Philadelphia, they could give you more information or turn you onto a book or like a video that would explain more
There's
about it.
there's plenty of
Yeah.
information out there on that. I just wondered if, because it is important, piece of history, and the War of the Roses is really where it all started with Lancaster. And, that was when the Tudors took over England. So Lancaster lost on that one, I'm sorry to tell you.
Another point for York.
I can't win.
Sorry.
Anyone else have any questions or comments? All right, well, yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.